Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joey Morgan, and I am with Retail Alliance. And I would like to thank you all for coming to this Strive Plus virtual webinar on the impact that the minimum wage changes might have on small businesses. Today, presenting on this topic is Jim Carroll, the Executive Director of SBDC of Hampton Roads. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them into the chat. Jim will be able to answer them there. And we'll also have time at the end to answer any questions you may have concerning this big issue for facing retailers. So with that said, Jim, thank you for presenting and take it away.
I certainly will. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to my presentation. This is a very, very serious topic that all small business owners have to understand and plan for, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So before we get started, I have to go through the paid advertisements. First and foremost, the SBDC of Hampton Roads is part of the Virginia SBDC network, which is a partnership between the Small Business Administration and George Mason University and the Hampton Roads Chamber. It should be recognized that the views that I'm going to use today are my views and not that of the Chamber, the SBDC, or George Mason University, or the SBA. So, don't start complaining to them, complain to me as we go forward. So let's take a look at things. Senate Bill 7 and House Bill 395. These bills were passed, and in 1 May, the minimum wage went from $7.25 an hour to $9.50 an hour, a 31% increase. And that's going to have an impact on small business owners, especially small independent businesses. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. In January 22, it's going to go up another 16%. In January of 23, another 9%. And then 24, there is nothing except that the General Assembly is going to have to meet and vote to authorize the next two increases in wage, from $12 to $13.50, and then from $13.50 to $15. If the General Assembly doesn't specifically approve these, then the wages will remain at $12. We now have a question mark. Okay, what's that going to do for your planning? Well, if you're a small business owner, it just adds another degree of uncertainty as you go forward. Do I factor in the wages going up to $13.50 and then $15 an hour, or do I going to Vegas and going up to the craps table and betting on the come? Do I roll the dice and hope I hit the pass line? So at the federal level, let's go back up one. There are some exemptions, and these are people who do not fall under the minimum wage law, and those are caddies who are on golf courses. If you're under 18 and employed by a parent or guardian, if you work for a summer camp, like as a camp counselor, potentially lifeguards, cooks, things like that, they're not under the minimum wage requirement. If you're under 16, regardless of your employer, if you're a work study program, if you're a babysitter doing less than 10 hours a week, and if you're a farm worker or laborer. Now, these are some of them that I pulled out of the Department of Labor and Industry Regulations. I highly recommend going onto that website and scrubbing it down completely so that you make sure you've got all of the information. These were the big ones that would have an impact on Hampton Roads, especially for the summertime and the summer employment. At the federal level, President Biden signed into law increases in the minimum wage for federally funded projects. Now, you have to understand, Governor Northam controls the state budgets and the state minimum wage. If you are bidding on a federal project, you have to follow these minimum wage levels. And October 2020, it goes to $9.50. And then, as you see, it goes all the way up until 2025, when it finally increases to $15 an hour. And after 2025, there will be upward adjustments based on the consumer price index. But funny though, it doesn't say anything about a downward adjustment. So $15 is going to be the floor. and it can only go up from there. It can't go below $15 an hour. Now, this is important if you're bidding on federal government contracts. We're at the Department of the Navy, the people working over at NASA, over on Wallops Island, Department of Army, Coast Guard, you name it. These are the wages you're going to have to factor into your planning for your overheads and things along those lines. And that's going to have an impact on your profit margins and also whether or not you're going to be profitable with the bids that you make, because like everything else under the federal government, they're looking for lowest price technically acceptable, and they're looking for your best and final offer. And so you're going to have to go through those and scrub them very, very well to make sure that you are not hurting yourself from a financial standpoint. Where does that leave small businesses? Well, you're in a quandary. If you go and do some research into both the pros and cons for for minimum wage increase, you find incredibly authoritative and passionate arguments on both sides of the coin. But I'm a firm believer that figures lie and liars figure. And everybody that these individuals, or the information that these individuals are presenting you, sometimes tends to be cherry picked. They're picking the stuff that fits their argument and not the overall big picture as to what's really taking place. The people who also are part of these authoritative studies have assumptions, and most importantly, they have preconceived notions or filters stating that this, is this way and it can't be anything else. And you can see the polarization in the country. Just at the political level, well, it really gets polarized, especially when you start talking about money. And then the question comes down to is it the market or a mandate for minimum wage? Does the market set the minimum wage? Basically availability of work and availability of employees versus should it be mandated by the federal government or the state government where it says one size fits all? A quality of outcome, not a quality of opportunity. These are all issues that, once again, small business owners are kind of stuck in the middle. And the biggest thing is the state of the economy. Okay, for a lot of the small business owners, what happened back in February, March of last year, we went into a mandatory shutdown, and small business owners had to literally just close their doors and not conduct business whatsoever. Or if they were one of the accepted groups, they were allowed to conduct business, but under very, very strict restrictions. So you just came off that. We're now getting back to some degree of normalcy. And now the governor turns around and smacks you with a 30% pay hike. Where does that money come from? I mean, you're already on the ropes, and now you got additional expenses you're going to have to take into consideration. And then, especially for the people in the restaurant industry, what about tips? If you are an employee in the food service industry, your base salary is $2.13 an hour. And your total earnings, including your tips, have to meet the minimum wage requirements. So in other words, that $2.13 an hour has to be $7.25 an hour. Now it has to be $9.50 an hour. If your tips don't cover that, employers have to make it up with money out of the till to cover you to make sure that you hit that minimum wage requirement. Well, one of the things is the Fair Labor Standards Act that's in effect. And it allows employers who have to go into the till to make up the difference between what the serving staff earn and the minimum wage. If they have to pay money towards it, those tips that additional money gets counted against their tax obligations in the future. And the impact is, what happens if this goes away? The president has already said he would be quite happy to see the Fair Labor Standards Act go away, the server-based salary get raised to $15 an hour. And, when I was over in France, you don't tip. And at the bottom of the bill, it says service est compris. In other words, service is included. So you don't have to worry about tips. The servers are getting paid. But that's the servers. What about the people who are working in the back? A lot of restaurants have the servers turn around and give a portion of their tips to the dishwashers, the people who are bussing the tables and things along those lines. There's a lot of complications that have to be addressed as you move forward with this. So under the Raise the Wage Act, which is something that is being considered but has not been passed yet, by 2025, everybody would be getting $15 an hour. And then there would be annual adjustments, once again, only upward, based on fluctuation in medium hourly wages. The question comes down to deep versus shallow pockets. You know, we are already seeing Starbucks saying, well, we're paying $17 an hour. Well, if you're an independent coffee roaster, you're not Starbucks. You don't have the pockets to afford that. And the people who are going to suffer the most are going to be small chains and independent restaurateurs and other food service industries that are independents. What's it going to react to? It's going to be a loss of jobs or wages. And surprisingly enough, 69% of servers who were interviewed said that they're getting paid more than $15 an hour with their tips. And they don't want to see a $15 an hour because that's going to be a pay cut for them. So let's talk about some of the arguments. You hear very passionately discussed is the current wages don't cover the cost of living expenses. And they're right. They don't. You know, I saw an article in the Washington Post, a woman who works at George Mason University. She has to work 3 jobs because she's the sole breadwinner for the family. Her husband, she doesn't have a husband. She has 3 kids and her mother's needs medical care. And so mom has to work 3 jobs in order to keep a roof over their heads. You know, it's a horrible, horrible situation. I will not make any bones about that. But if you're in a business where your profit margin is only 3%, and all of a sudden your wage costs go up 31%, what's that do to your profit margins? It destroys them. They talk about the fact that wages will increase for over 1.27 million Virginians. Okay, this is where figures lie and liars figure. How can they make that assumption, or how can they say that? They haven't shown any math to go with that. They talk about the fact that because there's going to be more money in the employees' pockets, their buying power is going to increase, are going to decrease these public assistance roles, and that's all going to go to help lower government costs. They don't have to be on Medicaid anymore. They don't have to have SNAP or any of the other government programs that are out there to help maintain a quality of life. And then they say it's going to create an additional incentive for people to work and stay in school to get qualifications needed so that they can stay in the workplace. And then you have the potential for more part-time employees. That's a good thing if you have enough potential part-time employees hanging around. But what happens if all of your part-time employees decide they don't want to work on Saturday? What are you going to do with your business? Well, you're probably going to have to close it. Right now, down at the Outer Banks, restaurants are closed Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, which is absolutely astounding because Saturday is usually one of their bigger days with it being turnover day and everybody wants to go out to dinner. But restaurants are closed Saturday, Sunday, and Monday because they don't have the staff to keep the place open. On the con side of the house, you know, before this got passed, last year when small business owners were sitting down and looking at their financial projections, they made a set of assumptions as far as what their salary expenses were going to be. Now that's gone up 31%. So they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and recompute the numbers to see what they can do in order to stay afloat. We're going to see an increase in joblessness. Companies are going to scale back either hours or positions. There are entry-level positions are going to be eliminated because who wants to pay a 16-year-old $15 an hour to work at a McDonald's? And then automation. I walked into a McDonald's one day, and the area where there used to be seating, there were 15 big screen TVs that were touch screen TVs, And so what you did was you walked up, you swiped your card into the TV, you made your order by touching the screen, and then it printed out a receipt with a number on it. And there was one person standing behind the counter, and that person would call out your number, you would go and you would pick up your bag. Okay, well, what about if you go into a Chick-fil-A and you see 5 or 6 cash registers going simultaneously? That's 6 people that have jobs. Automation is going to be taking those over. Potential for lower employee benefits. If employers are offering medical insurance, if they are offering paid time off, if they are offering retirement pay and things along those lines, this is low-hanging fruit in the expense department. And, employers can sit there and say, you know what? We're not going to provide medical insurance anymore because, hey, they can always go on Medicare or Medicaid or Obamacare or whatever you want to call it. So you have to be concerned that there's going to be some non-revenue issues that are going to have a financial impact on your employees if they get their benefits cut. Then you're looking at a wage scale compression. Your higher salaried employees, your maitre d', the manager, the bartender. If the staff is getting $15 an hour, how much do they get paid? Or are they going to have to work for the same as your minimum wage people? And so what you've done is you've downgraded the job from a advancement position to a minimum wage position. And there's going to be an impact on small business owners. I talked about it earlier with profit margins getting squeezed. It's going to be difficult. Restaurants in particular have a 3 to 5% profit margin. So that means that every dollar they bring in, they've spent between 95 cents and 97 cents just on delivering the goods and services when you factor in wages, when you factor in costs of goods sold, and when you factor in overheads. Usually 30, 33, and 32%. And if your wages start going up astronomically, what are you going to do? You have to figure out what options are available to you. And really, there are very, very few options that are available. The Retail Alliance did a survey. Matter of fact, I got this right out of the Retail Pulse that Kylie briefed us today. And they say 6% would consider automation. 17% would either reduce staff or they would cut overheads. 20% would reduce staff hours. 39% say it's not a problem because they already pay more than the minimum wage. But that's for right now. What happens in the future when it goes up to $15 an hour? And 42% said they would increase prices. Well, the $64 question is, where do you increase the price? Small business owners get hit, and especially now that we're going to a contactless, cashless society. Every time a credit card gets swiped, they're paying 2.75%, 3.75% in swipe fees to the credit card company. I now know of businesses that pass that swipe fee onto their employee, or not employees, onto their customers. And it says, if you pay in cash, it's this price. If you pay a credit card, I'm going to increase it by this amount, because that's the fee we have to pay to process this transaction. So do you increase your high-end prices? Do you increase your lower-end prices? And then at what point do your customers finally hit a pain point where they say, we can't afford to eat there anymore, or we can't afford to buy there anymore? These are challenges that small business owners are going to have to face. And unfortunately, a lot of times they're going to be making decisions based on incomplete data. And that's going to be a problem for them as they go forward. Everybody talks about Seattle, Washington. Seattle, Washington City Council voted and mandated that the minimum wage would go up to $15 in 2 years. And they say, and look at how many restaurants have closed. And once again, in the figures lie and liars figure category, the con side is saying Seattle's lost 150 restaurants or something along those lines. The pro side is saying, no, they didn't. They only lost this many restaurants. And, oh, by the way, here are some restaurants that are doing very, very well. And they trot out the one guy who's running a high-end steakhouse whose customers pay a much higher premium for their food. And he said, all I did was I added 25% on the bottom of the bill. So if your bill came to $100 for dinner, I put another $25 onto it, and so now you owed us $125, and that enables me to pay my staff $20 an hour. Well, that's good if you're a high-end restaurant, but what happens if you're a quick service restaurant or a fast casual restaurant? Do you have the ability to put 25% on the tab? And what happens if you're running a franchise? Will the franchisor allow you to do something like that? And I can tell you they won't. The other aspect of it is that the demographics in Seattle are widely different than the demographics here in Hampton Roads. And that Seattle has Microsoft and Boeing and the Microsoft millionaires and a lot of tech companies and startups. Hampton Roads doesn't. And the overall economy, when this bill was passed, the economy was booming. People could afford to pay the additional prices. When the governor signed his bill, it was right at the end of a pandemic, or the start of the end of a pandemic. And people were just coming out from their mandatory closings and things along those lines. So the bottom line is that it's inconclusive. You really can't make a comparison, apples and oranges. And that goes for Virginia as well. The cost of living in Washington, D.C. is significantly higher than the cost of living here in Hampton Roads. And you could say the same thing for going out to the West Country or to the Virginia Highlands. Totally different costs of living. Once again, is it one size fits all? It really shouldn't be. It really comes down to, as I said earlier, it's not if, but when. We have mandated raises that are going to be going up this year, next year, and in 2023. If industry people get together and start lobbying their representatives, both at the Senate, at the House of Delegates level, you can probably, hopefully, get people over to your side of the argument and say that, no, we shouldn't raise it past $12.50 an hour. You really need to sit down and run the numbers. And I can't emphasize that point enough. You've got to go back and scrub them, because all of the assumptions you made for this year, 2021, just got swept off the table. All of the RMAs that you have gone to and compared whether or not you are following industry standards just got swept off the table. So now you're going to have to start with a clean sheet of paper and figure out how you're going to make things work. So running the numbers is important, and understanding your financial position is critically important. That's where you have to sit down with your accountant and go through them with a fine-tooth comb. You have to identify where you can cut costs and at what point can costs be cut and not lose staff, and the same thing on increasing prices and not losing customers. You're going to have to game it out very, very thoroughly and cautiously. And the biggest thing is that you can't do this by yourself. You need to sit down with your accountant, your attorney, chamber, the Retail Alliance, the SBDC. Find out as much information as humanly possible as you go forward, so that you can make as informed a decision as possible as you address this issue. And subject to any questions, that pretty much concludes my presentation. And I thank you very much. Joey, over to
I
you.
was going to say, yeah, it was Joey.
Yes, as Jim said, if anybody has any questions, feel free to just you can ask them in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask them. We'll give that a second, and if not, thank you so much for presenting, Jim.
For Kristen, yes, I will go ahead and send out a copy of the presentation to everybody.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah, and we were recording this, so if Jim, you send that to me, and I will get that over to everybody who registered and attended.
All right, super. And you're welcome, Kylie. It's my pleasure.
All right. Well, I think that's good from everybody. Thank you very much for presenting, Jim, and thank you everyone for attending.
All right, thank you.